How do you build a high-performing culture? This is Culture Architects. Candid conversations with extraordinary leaders sharing their biggest successes, failures, and lessons learned on their culture journeys. Here's David J. Friedman.
Welcome back to my conversation with Ari Weinzweig, co-founder and co-owner of the Ann Arbor-based food company Zingerman's. Last time, Ari explained beautifully how culture building for him was really as much a creative act as cooking. And he walked us through how anarchism and open book management ground the way they operate their Zingerman's community of businesses. In this episode, we're going to dive deeper into two specific components of their company, their training arm ZingTrain and the Zingerman's 34 beliefs.
But we're teaching people to think. So when somebody's worked here for 2 years, they're going to leave here with an ability to process, to abstract, to come to good conclusions. And, it's not something I think we fully understood at all in the beginning, but it makes better citizens. I mean, because people don't go from being free thinkers at work to following autocrats out of work, it doesn't make any sense.
Our listeners will recognize, I think, as Ari's talking about that, the similarity between what Ari's describing and what we call our fundamentals. So what we teach organizations is to define a set of broad behaviors, which would be like your framework, to think about how do we approach situations so that inside of that framework, to use your word, people can make their own judgments and own decisions, but there's a philosophical framework within which we're making those decisions. And we call those fundamentals, that each company has its own set of fundamentals.
Sounds awesome.
So I'm curious, as you talk about beliefs, it's reminding me of a book that I recently reread. Did you ever read, this is a book from back in the 80s and 90s, did you ever read Joel Barker's Paradigms, The Business of Paradigms?
No, but I know his name. And
it's a really interesting book. It would resonate with you, I think, but he describes paradigms as similar to what you would call beliefs, in that we have a way of looking at things that profoundly influences how we interpret our world. And we are, like you're describing with beliefs, we are so frequently not even aware that we're seeing things through a paradigm. We're in the paradigm, and we don't even recognize that paradigm is influencing everything. And when we begin to realize that, his point is, we can begin to ask ourselves, okay, well, what paradigm am I operating inside of? And what would it look like to change that paradigm? And how would that change our world?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I'm not here to argue one way or the other. I think for me, at least, the beliefs is easier for people to process than the idea of paradigm, because they don't understand what the word paradigm means, whereas everybody understands what belief is. And then also is like, as I understand it, paradigms often are a combination of multiple beliefs that create a lens. And we have those too, but by just talking about beliefs, it allows for a much more granular application. So it's as simple as I'm watching a father get out of his car with 2 kids. If you have negative beliefs about one of your kids, it's going to make an impact. If you believe your kid can't learn, it's going to make an impact. If you believe you're a bad father, you will be, and it's not magic. There's still work to be done, but so in our world, it's very easily taught. If you believe the customer's a jerk, there's no way they're going to get good service. And then it's teaching them so when we have a belief about the customer based on certain behaviors, and then it's just coaching them okay, so they're acting in ways that seem rude and mean. I'm not disputing that. What are some other reasons some other stories that you might tell that would help explain why they're so, put in the term you want, rude. And of course, there's all the obvious. Their mother might be in hospice. They could have a kid who's really, just got sent home from school for bad behavior. They might have gotten bad health news. They might have just got laid off from their job after federal, subsidy reductions. They may be dealing with very difficult relationship issues, like all of these, and I'm like, could those be true? And they're like, yeah. Well, if those could be true, what if you approach the guest with that belief as opposed to approaching the guest with the belief that they're a jerk?
Yeah.
And of course, it changes the entire interaction, because when you believe they're a jerk, you come with low-level aggression.
Absolutely.
And the odds are high you're going to end up in a conflict, and then they're going to ask for the manager, and everybody's going to leave unhappy. If you choose the second set of beliefs, then you come with compassion, and then you gently commit yourself to trying to make their day better and to do the things that you would do for whatever your friend, if they were dealing with any of those things they made up. It's very practical, and this could be about coworkers. It could be about customers, it could be about products they need to sell, et cetera. So
in our world of, as I call them, fundamentals, we have a fundamental in my own company. It's in many of our clients.
Yeah.
We call it assume positive intent.
Yeah. That's another way to say it. We teach that too.
Yeah. If you, to your point, if you approach every interaction from that perspective, it fundamentally changes how you approach it.
Yeah. So
if you can articulate those.
Absolutely. Speaking of articulation, so one of the things that we undertook after the beliefs book came out, another siren, is I realized that we had written our mission statement in 1991, and that we had been very active with our visioning work since 1994, and we're teaching both of those. We had written our guiding principles or our ethics or values in 1991, but I realized, oh no, we don't have agreement on our beliefs. What's the difference between beliefs and values? I would suggest the values or guiding principles are your ethical beliefs. They're not ones you're going to change. But there's dozens, hundreds, thousands of other beliefs that have really nothing to do with ethics, but they're the intellectual ingredients that you're using to make decisions. And so if you don't get clarity on them, then everybody's arguing about the plant, but it's actually the root that's the issue. So we spent 2 years using our bottom line change recipe or framework, which is about involving as many people as possible in designing the change before it happens, as opposed to the hierarchical impose it quickly from on high. And we finished that work with what we call our statement of beliefs, which is, I think, 34 beliefs that we ask everybody to use while they're here. What beliefs they use out of work is none of our business, but it's no different than asking somebody to greet a guest in a certain way or make a cappuccino in a certain way. And the first one on the list is just what you said about positive beliefs. And so it's a job expectation here that they do that. Now if it's the root beliefs or the root system and they're 30 years old and they learned the negative beliefs at 2, the root's been growing 28 years. It's not coming out in 2 seconds, but at least you can have them be cognizant of the reality that this is going on.
Yeah. So I'm curious. It's interesting as you described, your 34 beliefs that you had articulated. And I imagine that there are some people who would hear that and say, oh, that's way too many. And so that, we have 30 fundamentals in our company.
Okay.
And most of our clients have between 25 and 30.
Okay.
And they would be similar to your beliefs. And everybody always thinks, oh, that's too many, but it's really not.
But why is it too many? It's just a belief.
Well, that's exactly it. And the reason it's too many is because the rest of the world has told them you're only supposed to have 5.
Right.
It's not because it doesn't make sense. It's because the rest of the world told them that.
Right. Which is the textbook example of beliefs and how it plays out.
So let me ask you this. In the system that we teach people we call them fundamentals again, we take those, in our case, 30 fundamentals, and our way of teaching them is to create, we call them rituals, ways of focusing on one at a time so they become embedded in just the way we operate. And so we take one fundamental each week and we do a series of things to focus on it next week, number 2, and so on. How do you take those 34 beliefs and get them indoctrinated into people?
Yeah, well, I'll say sitting here at the Roadhouse right now, where they've done a good job. They have other issues, but where they've done a good job with that, they did exactly that. It was called Belief of the Week, and every week at the managers meeting, somebody presented on one of the. They got to pick which one. And they gave a little talk on why it mattered to them and what it meant to them, and then there was discussion from the rest of the group. And then they started to spread that out with varying degrees of success into more and more other places. As you know from cultures, when it's in the culture, then it spreads like osmosis unconsciously. So we have other parts of the organization where it's been less heavily implemented. It's still there. I teach the new staff orientation class still, and I teach it in there. So everybody's at least hearing about it from me with a lot of what I just told you.
Yeah. And so you've got this community of companies now that have sprouted up over time.
Yeah.
And I know that wasn't your design. That's how it sort of evolved.
Yeah.
And you have in particular a training company.
Yeah.
So talk more about what does that training company do and how do they take the philosophies that you've evolved over time and teach that to others?
Absolutely. It's called ZingTrain. It started in 1994. One of the pieces of so we wrote our first formal vision. We had a vision in our heads like everybody does when we opened in 82. The first formal vision was written in 93 and 94, finished in 94. It was called Zingerman's 2009, which, as you can see, went 15 years into the future. And that's where we described this idea of creating a community of businesses.
Okay.
And what we wanted always from the beginning was to have only one place like the deli, as you said, not to do what everybody else does, which is open 100 of them, but rather to have this like amazing unique place that people would still remember 30 years later. And so when we were trying to figure out how do we grow and go forward, what we came up with was the community businesses. So operate as one organization. So not just me and Paul investing in other businesses. It was always meant to be one. Each business would have its own specialty. So you could keep the deli unique, but still provide growth. Each business would have a managing partner or partners in it so that people could have the chance to experience ownership in an area that they were passionate about, as Paul and I had done. And that we would operate as this, one organization with these semi-autonomous pieces in it and use all of this to create synergy, which is the refutation of Thomas Hobbes' misinterpretation of Darwin's survival of the fittest, where they teach everybody that survival of the fittest means it's a cutthroat war of all against all. But that's been disproven many times, first by the anarchist Peter Kropotkin in 1902, whose book Mutual Aid was awesome, and he was a scientist. Second, that I know of, there's probably others too, but by Ruth Benedict, the anthropologist, who in the 30s studied Native American tribes, and then more recently by Adam Grant, the University of Michigan graduate, very famous Wharton professor who wrote Give and Take, which basically says the same thing in Adam Grant's work. So what synergy literally means comes from the work of Ruth Benedict, and is what she found is that the most successful tribes were not the most cutthroat, but the most helpful, the most generous. So synergy literally means if I help you by doing this podcast, let's say, I'm also helping myself, which is true. And if I help myself by doing all this studying, I'm helping you at the same time. So the idea of the vision was when we started Zingerman's Bakehouse, every sandwich at the deli got better. So the recipe for the Reuben that you alluded to earlier is essentially the same, but the ingredient quality has gone up almost across the board. When we started ZingTrain in 94, it meant all the training got better, et cetera, et cetera. Maggie Bayless had been a cocktail waitress at the restaurant where Paul and I were working. She was a German lit major from Oberlin. She has gone to Chicago and worked in a big bank, which was fine, but not great. Then she started working in credit unions. Then she moved here following her college boyfriend, who then they broke up, but she stayed here. And she, unlike me, she went back and got an MBA from Michigan. Worked at General Motors, as she says, long enough, 2 years to find out that wasn't what she wanted to do. Left there and tried to find the opposite, which was a small consulting firm in town. So going from the biggest to this, tiny. And then, as she says, discovered that dysfunction of organization was not tied to size. And then, but the good news was at the small firm, she realized that she really was passionate about, organizational training design. And so when we shared that vision for 2009, one of the many, many good things about sharing a vision is that it draws people to you that also are inspired by that vision. So if you don't share it, how would they know? Right. So she came to us and said, the business school story about ZingTrain, which is wrong, is Paul and I were these brilliant, heroic strategists who realized people would want to pay to learn our methodology. So we started ZingTrain. The true story is we wrote a vision that talked about having these unique businesses within the organization with managing partners. And then Maggie came and proposed the idea of ZingTrain. And we were only smart enough to say, that's a great idea. Let's work on it. So it started in 94. ZingTrain teaches our approaches. So really pretty much everything I've shared with you, there's some version of it taught through seminars online now, pandemic, and then the core are 2-day in person are also going off. I'm going to New Jersey, I mentioned, to speak in a couple of weeks. So that's what ZingTrain does. And we don't really do consulting. We do training. We teach our own methodologies. So unlike many organizations, not saying this is a criticism, but they have the theory, but they don't have the practice. We're really using these with real employees and real customers and real dollars.
Fascinating. So it's interesting to me that, you are obviously very philosophical, and you've put a lot of deep thought, and I suspect, just getting to know you a little bit, that's just who you are. You've put a lot of deep thought,
probably
into,
to a fault.
Yeah, maybe to a fault, but still, it's who you are. Into how you think about business and how you think about people, etc. Where is, if you don't mind sharing, like you seem to be the spokesman for all of this. Where's Paul in all of this?
Well, I'm only the spokesman because you're talking to me.
Does he speak as frequently about this as you do?
No, but he could if he wanted to. I mean, I'm more the spokesman because I write a lot.
Okay.
And I would say there's a correlation between how much you write and how much people believe you know.
Whether
may
true
or may
not.
not be accurate, but I think that's a big piece of it. But I think the actual reality here is there's countless leaders who could speak to this quite eloquently, and they'll all say things in their own words and they all have their own experience. But I mean, I think to the context of culture, which you study and work in every day, I wrote it in the e-news for tomorrow, what I long believe, which is, so the hierarchy teaches you to look at me and Paul. Tomorrow's essay is about ordinary people, and that's really where revolutions come from, is not the leaders. It comes from ordinary people who get going and small actions here and there that start things moving. And so the business school version is to interview, I'm not criticizing you, but I mean, it's to interview me or Paul to get the answers. But what I'll tell you is I could walk in, I believe strongly, walk into pretty much any business, and from whatever my first interactions with a couple people, I'm going to tell you 90% of what you need to know about that organization, because it's like a plant. It's all manifested through the leaves. And of course, there's a few dead leaves on even the healthiest plant. But for the most part, if the energy is good at the counter and the first person, and it's pretty good from the second, and it's really good from the third, the odds are pretty high. It's a pretty healthy organization. If there's disconnect, cynicism, passivity from the first two or three people you interact with, the odds of it being a healthy organization are not that high. And so that's what I would say. Let me conclude the thought. And so what I would say is that part of what's interesting here is I really believe, I'm sure there's exceptions, but 90%, if you just walk up to anybody working here and ask them for thoughts about the organization, they will give you thoughtful, philosophically framed answers of their own. It won't be mine. I'm older and I've been writing a lot and thinking about this a lot. But the truth is, they're if you go up to a 20-year-old that's working the front door right now, they're going to give you a thoughtful answer too.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, because this is maybe a place where I might see things slightly differently from you, and I'm curious about your perspective, neither right nor wrong. You talk about the hierarchical way of thinking of things. And if I think about my experience having worked with, in both first and second company, I have probably worked with or seen certainly several thousands of small to middle-sized entrepreneurial companies. And my experience is that that experience you have at the front desk or at the counter And what that's like is so frequently, almost always reflective of the attitude of the CEO. That you have a jerk who's a CEO, you have jerk employees, and if you have a CEO
that's what
cares,
I'm saying. Yeah.
And so they do. But yet at the same time, and so let me add a layer to that. It's also my view, and what I teach people is that ultimately it's the CEO's responsibility to author they can't do it on his own, but it's not up to all the staff to say, well, what culture do you want? It's the leader's job to say, well, this is the kind of culture, this is the kind of company I want to build. I can't do it without all of the people living that, but isn't it the leader's responsibility to author that?
Yeah, it's both, I guess I would say. I mean, I'm not here to suggest that our culture spontaneously erupted from people in the front line. That's not my point.
Yeah, you and Paul had a vision of what you wanted.
My point is that they participate in the culture.
Yes.
Now, if you had 100 people here who wanted the culture to be negative, cynical, and think very narrowly, that wouldn't work because it's not in alignment.
Right.
Carol Sanford, who I mentioned earlier, I wrote a piece about this a couple months ago, talks about an idea that I really resonated for me. And it's the idea of essence. I mean, she certainly didn't make it up, but that every organization and every person has a unique essence. And that the work is to align the organization and its behaviors on every level with the essence, right? And that when a musician is true to their essence, when a business is true to its essence, it's going to manifest in the energy and the way it feels in the art of what you do, right? And part of what she said that was interesting, which I sort of had my instinctive response was to resist, but but she's right, is that the essence is almost always reflective of the essence of the founders.
Yes.
Because we started it,
Yes. Yeah.
And that's not bad. It's and the way that we do it, it's inclusive. So it's evolved with the input of a lot of people. So many other, there's things Maggie brought through the training. Tom Root, who's one of the partners at Miller, is super passionate about lean. I like lean. I believe it's a good idea. It's not my passion. It's definitely his, and he's taken it to new levels. Different people bring different things to the mix. And that's what we've done, is create a culture where it is inclusive and where many people can contribute. That said, the idea of having a culture where people matter and can contribute came from us.
Yes.
We didn't invent it, but it was there.
But
it was there on March 15th, 1982.
Yes, because it's to use your words, it's your essence. It was your vision, which is, back to the beginning, why we call this culture architects, because, you architected, you've included lots of people, but you and Paul architected the culture that you wanted based on who you are as people and the vision you had.
Yeah. Well, I would say there's so one of the pamphlets I wrote is called Story of Visioning at Zingerman's, and it's got an essay on sustainable visions that references Christopher Alexander, the architect. And he talks about this in his own way, which is basically, I forget how he says it exactly, but it's like the feeling with no name, like that you can't really pin down, but it's there. And then also I would say metaphor, like I'm working on 2 pamphlets now. One I mentioned is on democracy and my shifting beliefs around it, and that it's not about politics, that it's a value system, and that it supersedes politics. But the other is about this organizational ecosystem metaphor that I've been working on for many years, which I mentioned the beliefs as the roots. But in that metaphor, I'm not disputing any other metaphors or models, but culture I looked at like the soil, because it's always changing. It's never the same, because you could have parts of your farm are healthier soil and other parts are not healthy, because everything is impacting the culture all the time. So if a lot of people who work in your business watch very negative news reports, it's going to impact the service they give. Like, it's impossible not to, if the parents are healthier, it's going to impact the quality of the people you hire. If people can't get access to good food, it's very hard for them to bring good energy to work. So anyway, for me, that's where I look at it, but I agree with you completely. And it's really, the culture begins with us, and the responsibility is spread with the way we do it here. Everyone's 100% responsible, but that's not to deny my own.
Yes.
It's not 100 divided by 700. It's each of us 100.
Yes. I think that's a good way to state it. This has been a fascinating conversation. I really appreciate you joining me and sharing some of your philosophy. It is very aligned with my own philosophy and the things that we teach. I know that as people learn more about ZingTrain, about your writings, I know that you have your own publishing arm. Yeah. So you don't go through Amazon or things like that.
Not a big fan of Amazon.
No, I know you're not. So where would people get some of your writings?
So Zingermanspress.com.
Okay, Zingermanspress.com.
So we do the design and we print here in town, and we're on Amazon, but through resellers. So it's actually more expensive on Amazon, which makes me laugh. And then from ZingTrain.com, they have all the books and pamphlets on there. And then my email is ari@zingermans.com. People are welcome to reach out. They could find my e-news through other ways, but the easiest way, I think, is just to email me and I'll send it back to you.
Got it.
And then they can sign up. So I'm happy to answer questions. I don't have negative beliefs about email, so I'm not worried. Please reach out. And then, and then our food, of course, which is the bulk of what we do, is zingermans.com. And so that's the easiest way to get going on eating some of this stuff behind all that the philosophy makes possible. And then we also we have a little food tour business, Zingerman's Food Tours, and we take people mostly Europe, although now we started South Korea because we have a Korean restaurant, and also to Oaxaca and Mexico. So just going and visiting producers that we either buy from or want to buy from, but can't because the product can't be shipped, wineries in those areas, and often going like into, home cooked kitchens where there's enough room for 12, 15 people, but not like a giant restaurant, and really being able to have that sort of cultural learning and culinary learning. So that's also another way to enter.
Great. That's awesome. Well, thank you again, Ari. I really appreciate you joining me.
Thank you, man. My pleasure. Let me know what I could do, and let's keep in touch.
Absolutely. And that's it for today's episode of Culture Architects with Ari Weinzweig, the co-founder and co-owner of Zingerman's. Folks, if you've been enjoying what we do on this show, make sure you subscribe on your preferred platform, and then we'll automatically get updates on all my latest guests and episodes. If you have a minute, leave us a review, and that way more culture fans like you can discover the show. And lastly, if you want to learn more about building a high-performing culture in your team or organization, check us out at CultureWise.com. See you next time on Culture Architects.
This has been Culture Architects with David J. Friedman. Join us next time for more insights and wisdom from great leaders in all walks of life. To book David for your next event, or to learn more about his writing, speaking, or consulting, go to davidjfriedman.com. Culture Architects with David J. Friedman is a production of CultureWise.